It had been 6 months since I slammed the door on my old life in Texas, dragging my son with me into the unknown. Back then, we left behind the choking smell of whiskey and the sting of a man's temper, my husband, his father. He'd always been rough with me, and not just in words. The day I saw that same fury flash in his eyes toward our boy, I knew it was over. Now our days are quieter, but not without weight. I work long hours at a local diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the regulars know your name. The bills aren't small, but we manage, mostly because of my son. Caleb, 19 years old, just months away from graduating high school. He's a man in every way that matters. Strong hands, a stubborn jaw, but eyes that soften when they find me. Sometimes I catch myself thinking how much he looks like his father, and for a heartbeat, it makes me flinch, until I remember how different they truly are. Caleb would rather lift the weight from my shoulders than add to it. I'd gotten used to coming home tired and finding small things he'd done without me asking, fixing the loose kitchen drawer, replacing a burnt-out porch light, bringing home takeout so I wouldn't have to cook. And his hugs, they were never rushed. He'd wrap his arms around me like he meant it, like I was something delicate that deserved to be held. He'd joke sometimes, calling me his little princess, and though I'd roll my eyes, I secretly let the words settle in my heart. That Thursday night, the air in our small duplex felt thick with summer heat, even though the calendar still said April. Caleb was in the driveway, bent over the gleaming frame of his motorcycle, his pride and joy. I stepped out with 2 glasses of sweet tea, the condensation already dripping down my fingers. "You've been at it for hours," I said, passing him one. He looked up, smiling, grease smudged on his cheek. "Almost done. I want it ready for Sunday." "Sunday?" "Yeah," he said, eyes bright. "I'm taking you out. Just us. There's this scenic route west of here. You'll love it." I hesitated. "Caleb, I'm not exactly the biker type." "That's why it'll be fun," he teased, brushing his hand against mine as he took the glass. It wasn't an accident, at least I didn't think so. Something unspoken passed between us, and I found myself looking away first. Later that night, as I was folding laundry, I heard a knock on my bedroom door. Caleb leaned against the frame, a folded piece of paper in his hand. "Found this in the mail," he said, stepping inside. "It's from a lawyer. Looks like Dad's filing to contest the divorce settlement." My stomach dropped. "You read it?" "I didn't mean to, Mom. But he's trying to get you back there." "I'm not letting that happen." His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. I tried to smile, to reassure him, but something about the way he stepped closer, setting the paper down on the dresser, made my pulse quicken. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said quietly. "You don't have to carry this alone. Not with me here." And just like that, the room felt smaller. Not in a bad way, more like the world had shifted, pulling us closer together. I didn't know then that what would happen in the days ahead would change the way we saw each other forever. But I could feel it, like the low hum of a storm building just beyond the horizon. The night after Caleb handed me that lawyer's letter, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind dragging me through every possible outcome. Court dates, ugly confrontations, the threat of having to see my ex's face again. I could almost hear his voice, the way he used to spit my name when he was angry. But underneath that fear was something else, a strange, electric undercurrent I couldn't explain. It came from the way Caleb had looked at me when he said, "I'm not a kid anymore." It wasn't defiance. It was something quieter, steadier, and more dangerous in its certainty. The next evening I came home late from the diner, my apron still smelling faintly of fry oil and coffee. The house was dim, except for a warm light spilling from the kitchen. Caleb was there, leaning over the counter with a cutting board, chopping vegetables with surprising precision. "You cooked?" I asked, setting down my purse. "Figured you'd be tired." He glanced up with that easy grin. "Besides, I wanted to talk." Something about his tone made me straighten. "Talk about what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid a plate toward me, a simple dinner, but neatly arranged, like he'd put thought into every piece. "Eat first." We sat across from each other at the small table, the air heavy with the scent of garlic and the faint hum of the refrigerator. His eyes kept meeting mine and holding just a little too long. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was intense, like he was measuring something in me. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms behind his head. I meant what I said last night, he began slowly. I'm not letting him get near you. Not again. I swallowed. Caleb, it's not your fight. The hell it's not. His voice sharpened, surprising me. He put his hands on you. I was there, remember? I saw what he did. You think I could just forget that? His words hit me like a fist, pulling up memories I'd buried deep. Shouts, slammed doors, the flash of pain across my cheek. My throat tightened. I don't want you caught in the middle, I murmured. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, his gaze never breaking from mine. Mom, I've been in the middle since the day I was old enough to stand between you and him. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. The space between us seemed to shrink, the shadows in the kitchen drawing close around our little island of light. My heart was pounding, not from fear this time, but from the raw honesty in his voice. You've been carrying all of this by yourself for years, he said softly. You don't have to anymore. There was no teasing in his tone now, no trace of the boy who used to leave his socks on the couch and forget to take out the trash. He spoke like a man who had already made his decision, whether I agreed with it or not. Something shifted inside me in that moment. I realized he wasn't just my son. He was the one person who had been unwaveringly in my corner, even when the rest of the world had turned away. The sound of rain against the kitchen window pulled me back to reality. I stood abruptly, gathering our plates, needing to break the tension before it swallowed me whole. But as I reached past him to grab his dish, my arm brushed his, and the faint heat of his skin sent a shiver through me. He noticed. I knew he did, because his hand paused halfway to his glass, his eyes flicking up to meet mine again, calm, steady, but holding something new. Neither of us said anything, but I could feel the air between us shift, heavier now, charged with something that felt a lot like standing at the edge of a choice. And deep down, I knew the next time we stood this close, something would give. Sunday came with the kind of golden Texas morning that begged for an open road. I woke to the sound of Caleb's boots on the porch, the low rumble of his motorcycle vibrating through the air like a heartbeat. He was already waiting outside when I stepped out, a second helmet in his hand. The sight of him in that worn leather jacket, broad shoulders, confident stance, was enough to make me pause. For a split second, I didn't see my son. I saw a man who had every intention of taking me somewhere I'd never been before. Ready? He asked, his voice carrying that low warmth that always seemed to settle under my skin. I nodded, taking the helmet. My fingers brushed his as I did, and I didn't miss the way his eyes lingered on mine before he looked away. Mounting the bike felt foreign at first, my hands hesitating before resting on his waist. The leather was warm under my palms, and I could feel the steady rise and fall of his breath. You'll have to hold tighter than that, he said over his shoulder. I did. The moment we pulled onto the highway, the wind rushed around us, hot and dry, carrying the scent of sun-baked earth. My arms tightened instinctively, my chest pressed to his back. Every turn, every acceleration, pulled me closer until there was no space left between us. The ride was long, winding through open fields and lonely stretches of road. I could feel the strength in him, the subtle shifts of his body as he guided us, the way he leaned into the curves, steady and unshakable. It was impossible not to trust him completely. After nearly an hour, he slowed, turning onto a dirt path that led to a hill overlooking the river. The bike's engine faded into silence, leaving only the whisper of the breeze and the faint hum of cicadas. We sat there for a moment, neither of us speaking. Then he removed his helmet and turned to me, his hair mussed, his eyes sharp in the morning light. How was it? Intense, I admitted, my voice softer than I intended. A small smile tugged at his mouth. Good. I wanted you to feel it. I set my helmet aside, brushing a strand of hair from my face, still catching my breath from more than just the ride. And What exactly did you want me to feel? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint trace of his cologne mixed with leather and the road. That you're safe, he said finally. That I've got you. Always. Something in me gave way then. Not in fear, but in surrender to the truth I'd been avoiding. He had me. Not just as a protector, not just as my son, but as the one person who could quiet the noise in my head and make me feel seen. The silence between us grew taut, like a wire pulled to its breaking point. I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and unsteady, matching the faint muscle twitch in his jaw as he searched my face. And for the first time, I didn't look away. We stayed like that, locked in something wordless but powerful, until the air felt too charged to breathe. I knew, just as surely as I knew the road home would feel different, that something between us had shifted forever on that hill. The sun was hanging low over the hills, spilling gold across the river, when the moment nearly happened. We were still standing close, too close, on that quiet overlook, the silence between us thrumming like a string about to snap. His hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. Instead, my breath caught, and my eyes drifted to his lips before I could stop myself. He noticed. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The air felt thick, the whole world narrowing down to the space between us. If he'd leaned in even an inch, I don't think I could have resisted. And maybe I didn't want to. But that was the exact moment I forced myself to break it. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I took a quick step back, tucking my hair behind my ear like it was nothing. Beautiful spot, I said too brightly, pretending to admire the view. You've got a good eye for these things. The way he looked at me then, half amusement, half something deeper, made it clear he knew exactly what I was doing. But he let me have my escape. After a pause, he tilted his head with a grin. You ever thought about actually driving it? I blinked at him. You mean your bike? Why not, he said, pulling the keys from his pocket and twirling them between his fingers. You've never tried. I'll be right behind you. I laughed nervously. Caleb, I wouldn't even know where to start. I'll teach you, he said, already moving toward the bike. Come on, Mom. Trust me. The words sent a shiver through me. And of course, I agreed. Sliding onto the seat felt different this time. My hands gripped the handlebars, and before I could overthink it, he swung his leg over and settled behind me. His hands came around to rest lightly on mine, guiding my fingers to the controls, his chest brushing my back. Relax, he murmured near my ear, his voice low enough to tangle with the hum of the wind. It's all about balance. When the engine came to life under me, so did something else. Every movement was magnified, his steadying hands over mine, the subtle shift of his legs against me as we found our rhythm. We pulled onto the empty dirt road, the bike swaying slightly until I got the hang of it. He stayed close, speaking soft instructions, his breath warm against my cheek. The scent of leather, the low rumble of the engine, the feeling of him pressed just enough to remind me he was there, it all blurred together into something I couldn't quite name. The road stretched out before us in a ribbon of gold-lit dust, and the world seemed to slow. The sky was painted in pinks and oranges, and I felt free. Not just from my past, not just from fear, but from every rule I'd written for myself. And with him behind me, his touch steady, his voice a quiet anchor in my ear, it felt achingly, impossibly romantic. By the time we rolled to a stop, I didn't want it to end. My hands stayed on the bars, my body still leaning back into him. He didn't move either, and for a moment it felt like we were suspended there in the fading light, caught between what was and what could be. The ride back from the overlook was quiet, but not in the way most silences are. It was the kind that hums under the skin, that carries every unspoken thing neither of us dared to put into words. By the time we pulled into the driveway, dusk had settled over the neighborhood, the air warm and still. I cut the engine, and for a moment we just sat there, the ticking of cooling metal filling the space between us. Caleb didn't move right away. His hands stayed lightly on my hips, almost as if he wasn't ready to let go. When he finally stepped off, he offered me his hand like I might still need help, though I knew I didn't. I took it anyway. Inside, the house felt different, smaller somehow, and quieter than the road had been. I set my helmet down on the counter, still feeling the ghost of his hands guiding mine, the way his voice had wrapped around me like the wind. "You did good out there," he said from behind me, his tone softer than usual. I turned, trying for a light smile. "Good?" I didn't even stall it. That's more than most first-timers can say. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, but his eyes were steady on mine in a way that made my pulse trip. I busied myself with pouring 2 glasses of water, anything to keep from drowning in that look. "I still think it's safer with you driving." "Maybe," he said, "but you should have seen yourself. You were smiling the whole time." I froze for half a beat before shrugging it off. I was just enjoying the scenery. His reply came low, almost under his breath. "So was I." The words landed somewhere deep in me, stirring up the same mix of emotions I'd been wrestling with all day. I turned back to him, and for a split second, neither of us looked away. The tension was back, heavier than before, curling between us like invisible threads pulling tight. I wanted to thank him for the ride, for the day, for the way he made me feel like I wasn't just surviving anymore, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I took a slow sip of water, willing my heartbeat to calm. He stepped closer then, just enough to make me aware of every inch. "If you ever want to go again," he said, his voice warm and certain, "just say the word. Doesn't matter where. I'll take you." I nodded, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would give away too much. That night, lying in bed, the darkness felt charged, my mind replaying the feeling of the wind, the warmth of him behind me, the steady sound of his voice in my ear. I knew I was crossing dangerous ground, but I also knew I didn't want to turn back. The house had gone still hours ago, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I lay there in the dark, sheets tangled around my legs, the faint hum of the ceiling fan doing nothing to cool the heat that seemed to simmer under my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, the day replayed, his steady hands guiding mine on the handlebars, the way his voice had sounded so close I could feel it in my bones, the warmth of him when I leaned back without thinking. I turned onto my side, watching the shadows shift across the wall, trying to will myself into sleep. That's when I heard the soft creak of my bedroom door. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, until I saw his silhouette, framed in the faint light from the hallway. He didn't say anything, just stepped inside and quietly shut the door behind him. My breath caught. Caleb moved with a slow certainty, crossing the room until he was right beside my bed. Then, instead of sitting on it, he lowered himself onto the floor, leaning back against the side, his arm resting casually on his bent knee. The closeness felt heavier in the quiet. We sat like that for a moment, the darkness wrapping around us. I could hear his breathing, steady and calm, and my own, quicker than it should have been. Then he tilted his head, his voice low and unhurried. "What do you like better?" He paused, and I felt his eyes on me even though I couldn't quite see them. "When you sat behind me on the motorcycle? Or when I was behind you?" The question landed deep, sending a slow rush of heat through me. My fingers curled in the sheets, my mind flipping through flashes of both moments, the thrill of clinging to him as the world flew past, and the intoxicating awareness of him pressed against me, his hands guiding mine. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Why are you asking me that?" He gave a faint smile I could hear in his tone. "Just curious." But I knew it wasn't just curiosity. The air between us tightened, charged with everything we weren't saying. I shifted under the covers, the fabric whispering against my skin, and I felt his attention sharpen. I could have answered him honestly. I could have told him exactly which moment had made my pulse race harder. Instead, I looked away, though he couldn't see my face in the dark. "I don't know," I murmured, my voice too soft, too shaky. I felt, rather than saw, the way he leaned a little closer. "I think you do." The heat rose higher, curling low in my stomach. My heart was loud in my ears. I wanted to break the moment, but I couldn't seem to move, not away from him. The quiet stretched between us, thick enough to touch. I could sense his eyes on me in the dark, steady and unblinking, and it made my pulse beat faster. "You think I do?" I asked finally, my voice low. He gave a small huff of amusement.
"Yeah."
"I think you've been thinking about it just as much as I have." I let out a soft laugh, too quiet to be casual, too shaky to be confident. "And what makes you so sure you're on my mind?" "Because I know the look you get when you're holding something back," he said, his tone a mix of certainty and challenge. "You had it on the hill earlier, and when you were driving." I pulled the blanket a little higher, half as a shield and half because his words made me feel suddenly exposed. Maybe I was just nervous. He leaned his head back against the side of the bed, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of him through the fabric. "You weren't nervous," he said softly. "You were enjoying it." I hesitated, my lips parting to answer, but nothing came out. He chuckled under his breath, like he'd caught me. "I liked it better when you were in front," he added, his voice dropping lower. That earned him a glance from me, even in the dim light. "Oh, and why's that?" His eyes found mine, and even in the shadows I could see the glint there. "Because I could see your smile. Because I could feel you leaning back into me, like you didn't want any space between us." The air felt suddenly too warm, my heartbeat too loud. "You're awfully sure of yourself," I murmured. "Only when I'm right," he teased. I shook my head, but it wasn't to deny him. It was to keep from giving myself away completely. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said with a faint smile, "you're not telling me I'm wrong." I opened my mouth to answer, but he shifted then, turning so he was kneeling beside the bed, one hand braced lightly on the mattress. His face was closer now, the shadows softening the sharp lines of his features. "You know," he said quietly, almost like a secret, "you could just tell me." I swallowed hard, my breath catching. "Tell you what?" "That you felt it too." The way he said it low, certain, pulled something loose inside me. My hand moved without thinking, resting on the edge of the mattress near his. Neither of us spoke. The space between us was so small now that I could feel the faint brush of his breath against my cheek. And then he closed it. His lips touched mine in the barest, gentlest kiss, just a brush, hesitant but full of every unspoken thing we'd been circling all day. It was over almost as soon as it began, but the rush of heat it left behind was enough to steal my breath completely.